Great. So good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Danielle Coco. I'm the Marketing and Communications Director at SESTA. And we are excited to have you on our webinar this morning to learn more about Canada. We have a great panel of speakers. Before we get started, though, as you just heard, we are recording the webinar. I will post the recording as well as a PDF of today's presentation on SESTA's website. If you log in and you click on past webinars, it will be there most likely by the end of today. If not, it'll be done tomorrow morning. A few other things, everybody is muted just to reduce background noise and barking dogs, things like that. So if you have questions, feel free to type them into either the chat or the Q&A bar throughout the presentation, and we will address all questions at the end. All right, so we'll move on, Laura, if you don't mind. Laura's driving our presentation. So I already introduced myself, and today we are also going to hear from Laura Pixley at Argyle PR. Argyle is SESTA's consultant based in Canada. They have worked with us for over 10 years in the Canadian market, and they help with all manner of projects and getting our companies into Canada, managing events in Canada. I'll let them talk more about everything they do, but they have been great partners with us. We also have Arella Delabashi on as a presenter. She is with the USDA's Foreign Agricultural Service. Arella is the agricultural marketing specialist based in Montreal and has been working with SESTA for several years as well. And then we also have a U.S. exporter, so one of our own out of North Carolina, Pat Ford with Ford's Gourmet Foods. They're a fourth-generation company in North Carolina. They're a SESTA participant, and they export to Canada. So we thought Pat would have a really good and interesting perspective for all of our small businesses who are on the call and interested in doing what he's doing. So before we jump in to their presentations, I just wanted to, for all of you who are new to SESTA, give a really brief one-slide overview of all of our programs and services. You know, we really try to group everything into these three different categories: export education. So that's going to be things like today. You know, this webinar, it's free, it's, you know, purely educational. We're really just trying to make sure that our companies are, you know, learning and getting well prepared to export before going into the foreign market. In addition to webinars, we have a very robust export readiness training. We offer it twice a year. It's on Zoom and it's done live. We just finished the spring training in May. We will offer another one this fall. We're just confirming dates now, but it will probably be in October. So if you're interested in exporting, but you're kind of, you know, a little deer in headlights, like, oh, where do I start? That training is great. It's 12 hours, which I know seems long, but it covers all the fundamentals, kind of the A to Z of exporting, and companies that go through it always come out feeling like, okay, this doesn't seem so overwhelming now that I know all of these, you know, the support and everything that comes with exporting. We also have an export helpline where you can access a consultant who has over 15 years of experience in the business and can help, you know, navigate things that come up in the export process, and consultations with our in-country consultants, which you can register for on our website. Our global events are trade missions and pavilions at trade shows where you can meet foreign buyers. We have them up on our website on the events page. This is a great program where, you know, you can register, participate in an event, and connect with buyers, you know, tons of buyers. We have a trade show coming up in Canada where there's going to be a SESTA pavilion. It's Grocery Innovations Canada. That's coming up at the end of October in Toronto. And then through 50% cost share, companies in our programs can apply for 50% reimbursement of certain international marketing expenses. So for instance, if you apply for cost share for Canada for this year, you could apply to get 50% reimbursement of your booth fee for grocery innovations, travel expenses for 2 people, your marketing materials, shipping your products to the show. It could also be advertising, or once you get into Canada, you have to modify your labels. So you could use cost share to get 50% back for the not just the translation and redesign of your labels, but also producing labels for Canada. So, this year, next year, moving forward, every time you have to create new packaging or bags or whatever it is for that market, you can apply to get 50% reimbursement. So, our purpose is we work with small businesses, and we just want to make exporting as financially and logistically easy for a small business to start exporting and look at international markets. So that is all I wanted to say. I will let you all take it from here.
Good morning, everyone. Danielle, thank you very much for that fine introduction. Hello, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Aurelia Delibashi. I'm with the Foreign Agriculture Service, FAS for short. FAS is the foreign service arm of the United States Department of Agriculture. We have 100 offices worldwide covering 180 countries. Our main mission is to expand and promote U.S. exports in the Canadian market. Our office here in Canada, we have 3 offices, one in Ottawa out of the headquarters, the U.S. Embassy in Ottawa. We have another office in Toronto out of the U.S. Consulate in Toronto, and Montreal, where I'm giving this fine presentation today. Montreal is based in Quebec. The French-speaking province is the only French-speaking province, or as we call it here, La Belle Province. You have the information, the credentials for the 3 offices. And of course, after the presentation, if you have additional questions, I make myself available to provide one-on-one guidance and respond to any questions you might have. So please don't hesitate. And of course, Laura will reiterate this message at the end. So if you have any questions or you need additional information on whatever I'm presenting today, please reach out. Our main mission really is to help SMEs like yourself in their export journey in the Canadian market. We are the support on the ground for any question you might have. So please don't hesitate. Next slide, please. So what is FAS? For those of you who are new, or is the first time that you hear about FAS, we have 3 pillars. The first one is market development and promotion. We initiate market development activities, either unilaterally, just our office, or we collaborate with other trade associations in amplifying their marketing message in the Canadian market. The second pillar is trade policy. We analyze and report on Canadian trade policy and agricultural activities, and we do that through our GAIN reporting. If you're not aware or familiar with our GAIN reporting, you can just Google right now GAIN FAS, and you will be introduced to a plethora of resources that could be very, very beneficial to you in this export journey, because research is the most important thing when you are considering into exporting. If you're new to export or new to market, I think research is primordial in all of this process. The third pillar is trade facilitation, trade capacity building. Of course, we work with federal, provincial partners to remove any trade irritants or trade barriers for U.S. products coming into the Canadian market. Of course, we provide market analysis and any support at ports of entry if needed. Now, when I was talking about market development activities, marketing campaigns, we do that under Taste USA brand umbrella. Taste USA is for the English-speaking Canada, and Prenez Gouauzeta is for Quebec, the French part. Taste USA is our brand umbrella, and we use Taste USA to work with over 45 trade associations who are very much active in the Canadian market. Of course, we are very active on the digital side, Facebook and Instagram, but also Twitter as well. Next slide, please. So when I mentioned that we work with over 40 U.S. Trade Association, who are very much active in the Canadian market. Here you have a slide that just gives a little sample of all the associations that we work with. And as you can see, SASTA is a very important partner to us. We've worked on collaborating and supporting whatever activities SASTA is engaged in the Canadian market. And of course, we do that through our digital site under the Taste USA or traditional. So any support that is needed from any of our cooperators, our mission is to amplify any marketing campaigns they do in the Canadian market. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the trade volume. So I always highlight numbers because numbers are the most important indicator of the importance of the Canadian market to the US. In 2022, and I'm going to speak about total agricultural export at 28.3 billion, as you can see on the left side of the chart. And Canada, as an export market, was the third largest after China and Mexico. But when it comes to value added or packaged products, which is, sorry, I'm just hearing it. When it comes to value added or consumer valued packaged products, we are at around 19 billion, which is the largest market, the largest export market for the US vis-a-vis this type of product. So that makes Canada a very, very important trading partner for the US, and is precisely those packaged products that you, as members of SASTA, are trying to export here in the Canadian market. So that makes, if you are new to export or if you are new to market, Canada would be the ideal market for your product, given the proximity. Geographically, we're right there. The familiarity. Canadians trust and love US products because of the food safety standards are very similar for Canada and the US. So a Canadian consumer will look at a US product and will look at a product coming from anywhere else and will trust the US product any time of the day. So you do have that familiarity and that trust that comes with being so close to Canada. So that's why Canada would be an ideal market, and of course the language. And I always say to US exporters who try to shy away from the Quebec market, please do not ever shy away from the Quebec market. Yes, it's French, but you do have resources here to help you and support you and guide you through that process if you want to consider Quebec as your first to export market. Quebec and Ontario make 60% of the economic power, so it's the second largest province in population and economic power. So please, I'm here to tell you, do not shy away from Quebec. It's a very important market, sophisticated palate. They are always looking forward to new products. So if you ever want to hear more about Quebec, as I said, please reach out to me directly, and I will provide a little bit more guidance. Next slide, please. So as I said, 19.7 billion of consumer-oriented or packaged products. So basically the type of products that you're trying to export here. As you can see on the right side, you have a list of what those top 15 US exports to Canada are. And as you can see, we have bakery goods, cereal, pasta, fresh vegetables, fresh fruits, and so on and so forth. Just to kind of give you an idea of what the US is exporting to the Canadian market. Next slide, please. Oh, and that's it, I think. I just wanted to thank everyone for paying attention to this presentation and joining us. I'm looking forward to any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thanks, Aurela. Good morning, everyone. My name is Laura Pixley. I'm with Argyle. We are SASTA's Canadian in-country consultant, as Danielle mentioned earlier. I just wanted to give a brief overview of the population and geography of Canada, because it's important to consider when you're looking at your export plans. So the population of Canada is only 38 million, which is about a tenth the size of the entire US population. So it's a very small market compared to the US. There are two official languages in Canada, English and French. The majority of people do speak English, but legally French and English are our two languages. And as Aurela mentioned, there's a very large French-speaking population in Quebec and in some other provinces as well. The capital of Canada is Ottawa, which is in Ontario, very close to the US border. Our GDP is around 54,000 Canadian dollars, and the exchange rate as of a couple of days ago was 75 US cents for every 1 Canadian dollar. So keep that in mind, that when you're dealing with your customers in Canada, when you're thinking about pricing, factor in the exchange rate as well. Something else to note is that the populations of our key provinces. So as you can see on the top right of this slide, Ontario and Quebec are the 2 largest provinces in terms of population. Western Canada has around 10 million people combined, and then Atlantic Canada, which is the 4 provinces on the East Coast, are quite small with a combined population of 2.3 million. And I'm just going to invite Pat Ford to come in and speak about currency conversion and invoicing with his experience with Canada.
Thank you, Laura. The currency conversion, we deal in US dollars. It's easier. We don't have to play the market. We don't have to bill somebody, and then a couple of weeks later, we get an ACH into our account for a lot less than we expected. It's a variable that we can't have in our business, so we always deal in USD. So it always, as far as making it easy for you, I would work in US dollars. I wouldn't work in international currency. So what your fixed costs are when you start, translating or, exchanging currency, you're adding a whole different level of a variable that we're just not comfortable with. So it's one way to make it easier on you. But do know that everything you're selling is about 25% more in the Canadian dollar. So, those are 2 things to consider when you're going to market.
Thanks, Pat. So a little bit more about the Canada-US trading relationship. The border between the 2 countries is over 5,000 miles, so it's quite a long landmass that we share. There's over 120 land border crossings and 23 international bridges between the US and Canada, so there are lots of various transportation points. It's a very busy border in terms of both commercial and personal travel, but US $1.7 billion of goods cross the border every day. And it's about US $1 million every minute that's crossing the US-Canada border. So it's a very established and busy trading relationship. Why Canada, why you should look at Canada, and why Canadians like US products. As Aurella mentioned earlier, Canadians trust American products. They trust that the products will be safe and of high quality because of similar regulatory arrangements and because of the geographic proximity and similarity in business markets. The US products are trusted in Canada. Canada is also a very good market to test launch products, especially when you're thinking about international expansion and looking at other countries. Canada can typically be a good place to start for food and drink products because we have such a diverse population, but also because of similarities between the 2 countries. Canadians are typically more open to trying new products. So it can be utilized as a good test market before you look at other international markets. There's also, of course, similarities between the 2 countries. We have similar language, culture, eating habits, purchasing trends, values, pricing, that sort of thing. While there is a difference in the Canadian and US dollars, it is more similar compared to some other global currencies. There are
Laura,
various...
I'm
yes,
sorry.
please.
Can I just throw this in real quick? Talk about testing things. Currently, we're doing a test program in TJ Maxx Canada. We are not in TJX in the US, but it's a good way for us to test that market and see how it's perceived to that demographic. So yes, what a great way to do something off campus, off site, and see how it goes, not to affect your US market. Anyway, just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Pat. That's great. Yeah, various routes to market in Canada. US companies can be non-resident importers. You could also work with a Canadian importer, distributor, or direct with retailer, which we'll get into more in detail further in this presentation. And as we discussed earlier, the trucking and transportation industry is closely linked. And Pat, maybe you can come back onto this point as well and speak about as far as transportation goes from your perspective working with Canada.
Oops, sorry. I think I just, whoops, sorry. Okay, so Sorry, I'm just having a webinar moment. With us, with shipping from here, it's so easy. They just pick up on our dock. It's the same as going anywhere in the US because it's going by truck. We do see some at the moment that are going by air, which is very new during the pandemic. We're seeing some go from us in Raleigh down to Atlanta, and then Atlanta Hartsfield Airport flying into Canada, even though they're going to Toronto. But sometimes it's hard for the trucks to get over the border. Maybe they're backed up. But typically you'll see, the paperwork is very basic. It's a Canadian customs invoice. It's the USMCA agreement, which you can have printed out. They're easily obtainable. And then your packing list and your invoice. So the paperwork is really not hard to have to create. And also it's just like loading any other truck or UPS. UPS carries it straight over the border. So you won't see a lot of issues with shipping into Canada.
Some more advantages of doing business in Canada, as we mentioned, it's mostly English speaking. Whilst we do have a very large population of French speakers in Canada, most of those folks also speak English or another language. We have an established trade relationship, similar business practices. Because of USMCA, which Pat just mentioned, there's tariff eliminations or reductions on most products, which means you're not going to be looking at additional costs or higher prices because of these tariff reductions. Canada has a strong reputation for ethical business practices and very low rates of corruption. So it's a low risk country to do business in. The geographic proximity results in shorter shipping timelines. But as Pat just touched on, through COVID, there have been some issues with the border, but still shelf life is mostly preserved because of the geographic proximity. Canada is a relatively small and concentrated market compared to some other global markets. Working with one or two customers in Canada can typically grant you access to the entire market. So if you have an importer distributor partner that's national, they can provide you with coverage across the whole country. So it's somewhat easier to work with your customers in Canada when you have just a smaller number of folks to service, and they'll take care of the rest of the market and your sales in Canada. The grocery retailers in Canada have very extensive and efficient distribution channels. They'll provide guidance as to what they need and when they need it and how to sort of ship things to them and how to work with them. And finally, the population is ethnically diverse, which means there's a lot of opportunity for a wide array of specialty cuisines. So there's a lot of different cultures in Canada and lots of different food options. And our population is mostly growing through immigration. So there's a continued demand for unique flavor profiles and unique products. Some of the challenges of doing business in Canada, just to note that there are market differences. They're subtle, but it is a different market than the US. And a lot of times the general population considers the US and Canada to be very similar, which we are, but there are some differences to keep in mind when doing business in Canada. It is a highly competitive market. So there are a lot of products that are already available, and the cost of doing business can be high. The food grocery retail market in Canada is an oligopoly. So we have just a few major players who control the whole market, which we'll come on to that momentarily as well. But because of this, they can charge listing fees and they typically demand large marketing and advertising budgets, but this isn't always the case. So just keep in mind, working with large retailers can be expensive in Canada. Another cost that you may wish to consider or that you may need to consider is the packaging and labeling requirements in Canada differ to that of the US because we are a bilingual country. Packaging and labeling needs to be in both French and English, and as well as the nutritional facts table. So that can be costly, but again, that's something that you can speak to your Canadian partners about, because there are some solutions to the packaging and labeling regulations, such as stickering or putting stickers on the back of products to bring them into compliance. But importers are very good with working with their suppliers to help bring products into compliance and to help with labeling regulations.
Laura, real quick on that, we have two different options. One is you can spend all the money and create a label and create a product and inventory it just for the Canadian market, or you can, as you're saying, over sticker the label. And it's as simple as getting the information getting it translated and putting it over the nutritional panel, because of course it's the United States nutritional panel. Other countries don't really have, aren't really concerned with what the United States wants on their nutritional panel. But if you go into the stores, you will see lots of American products that are just stickered. And it's an Avery label, or it's whatever you have as a labeling machine. It doesn't have to be expensive. We actually charge $1 per case at our place to put the stickers on. And that's a common practice because you have to open it up and put it on. But do get guidance from your importer or your customer on how they want the label, and let them okay the label and verify it. So you don't just think it's okay. Let it get some help on that. And a lot of times it's free and you won't even have to pay for it, because they'll be glad to help you with it, or have somebody on staff that can.
Thanks, Pat. So because of the increased competition in the Canadian market, products that are competitively priced or have very strong USPs typically do well in Canada. Some other challenges to note that there are some market access barriers in certain categories. So for dairy and poultry, for example, these are supply managed sectors. So it's difficult to export dairy and poultry products into Canada. And there are requirements around import quotas and things like that. Some baked goods as well also require mandatory use of fortified flour, and the fortification requirements are different to other countries that have fortified flour requirements. So some companies create a manufacturing line that's specifically for Canada and use the fortified flour in that line for those products that are destined for Canada. But this is also something that can be talked about with an importer or distributor in Canada to see what their specific requirements are, because the liabilities around imported products fall to importers. So whoever the importer of record is in Canada, that's the party responsible for compliance. So now to speak about our grocery retail market. There are two national grocery retailers in Canada, Loblaws and Sobeys. These are both still family-owned businesses, but they are very, very large businesses, and they control the majority of the grocery retail market. So as you can see on the screen, Loblaws has almost 30% food retail market share, and Sobeys has a 21% food retail market share. They combined have billions of dollars in sales and many different banners. So some of their banners are higher end, more premium stores, and some are discount. Some are drugstores and kind of more regional premium grocery retailers. We also have Costco and Walmart in Canada, but they have much smaller food retail market shares compared to Loblaws and Sobeys. Go ahead, Pat.
Okay, so one thing on the stores there, Loblaws, Sobeys in particular, sometimes distributors will have what they call a back door, or they have a way into these stores that they maybe only sell to 3 to 5 to 7 or a dozen or whatever. And so the listing fee wouldn't apply, and you can just have like your product in a few stores, maybe in Toronto or something like that. So there is ways to get in without getting all of them. So I just want to touch on that.
Thank you. Our regional grocery retailers in Canada, the two largest are Metro and Pattison Food Group. So Metro operates in Ontario and Quebec, which is Eastern Canada, and Pattison Food Group operates in Alberta and British Columbia and the Prairie Provinces, which is considered Western Canada. Metro is much larger. They have about 10% food retail market share, but I think that's mostly based on populations as well, because Eastern Canada is much larger than Western Canada. As you can see here, sales are still quite large from these retailers, but much smaller compared to the Eastern Canada and national retailers. These regional retailers also have multiple banners that they own. Some are drugstores, some are discount grocery retailers, and some are more higher end retailers. In Canada, these aren't the only two regional grocery retailers we have. We also have hundreds of smaller independent regional retailers that are very receptive to new products and to listing US products in particular. they typically are concentrated in geographic regions. So we have, some independent chains that will have about 20 or 30 stores in the Toronto area, some that will have 10 or 15 stores in Vancouver, some that are just in Montreal. So there's a lot of independent regional chains that are quite a bit easier to work with than these larger chains. Pat, would you like to say anything on regional grocery retail?
Yes, absolutely. So as far as where you can make money and getting your products into Canada, places like Metro and other Loblaw, Sobeys, they are going to be a little bit more expensive to market. If you do want to, we always like to try and make money while we're doing it. We go after the smaller independents to start with, and we build those up in an area, and then the bigger stores will find you typically. They shop their competitors. They know what's on the shelves. They see what's working. So that way they'll pull it through instead of you trying to push it through. And at that point, you have a lot more leverage, and you can just say, I just can't afford the listing fees, or we can't afford that. We'd love to work with you, but your shoppers are leaving your store and going to a place down the street to pick up our product. So why not try and incorporate those shoppers or the whole basket and sell to them? But that's a really good way of getting into the bigger guys, doing the latter thing and working your way up to it. A lot more affordable.
Some trends and opportunities in the Canadian market. These are just the key trends that we're seeing right now. There are others and niche opportunities, but overall, Canadian customers are looking for health and healthy foods with healthy ingredients. They want convenience, so things that they can easily eat on the go or that don't take a lot of time to prepare. Sustainability is becoming increasingly important in Canada. So this includes ethical living, eco-friendly packaging, animal welfare, anything that falls under that sustainability umbrella is important to a consumer. And it's also important for brands to communicate this sustainability messaging to consumers because that's what folks are looking for when they're making their purchasing decisions increasingly. Organic, natural, and clean labels are a big trend right now. Higher quality premium products are trending as well. And of course, local, which I think is a trend in all markets. But, Canadians want to buy local and they want to support local businesses. So if you're not local, you're not manufacturing in Canada, you can engage locally, engage with the communities where you sell the products and have local social media presences or, just local initiatives that help you appear to be localized or appear to be invested and engaged with the communities where your products are being sold. It's interesting to note that a lot of products that come from the US might actually be, if they're sold in Ontario, they're more local than a product coming from Western Canada. So, there's a lot of US states bordering Ontario and Quebec, and products might be made 500 kilometers away or 300 miles away. But some people consider local to be made in Canada. Some people consider a certain geographic radius. So it depends on the definition of local, but that's something to keep in mind. Go ahead, Pat.
And Laura, that's a great thing saying, engage locally. One easy way to do that is promoting posts on social media with a geographic region, of what you're looking at. You can actually specifically show your ad to people in a specific area, which is so you're not just shotgunning it, you're sending it right to those people. So if you have a store in Toronto or Ottawa, you can actually draw a 30-mile circle around that and then show your ads just to those customers. And you could even say, show it only to people who like Sobeys in Ottawa. And you can really dial down your social media advertising. So you're spending your money and your ROI is a lot better. And you'll appear local.
I'll mention that's 50% reimbursable through cost share. And if you want to seem local as well, you could do through cost share, you can get 50% reimbursement for in-store sampling. So you could hire somebody in Canada to be in the grocery, sampling your products directly with consumers and doing that in all the Sobeys in a certain region or whatever it is, which might also give a feel of, investment in the region as well.
Yeah, those are both great suggestions of engaging locally. Thank you both. Some key categories that are big opportunities in Canada right now. So beverage alcohol is a big opportunity in Canada, but I don't believe we have any beverage alcohol companies registered for this webinar, so I won't go into detail on that. because it's a completely separate market to the grocery stores. You can't sell beverage alcohol into grocery in Canada. Non-alcoholic adult beverages. So these are things like premium sodas, premium mixers, healthy juices, that sort of thing. Premium grocery products and snacks. We mentioned natural, organic, and health foods. Fresh produce, of course, in Canada, we can't grow a lot of fresh produce, and what we can grow it year round. So the US is a very large supplier of fresh produce for Canada. We import a large majority of our fresh produce from the US and also from Mexico. Meat and seafood is big. Even though Canada produces both of these categories, there are certain species and certain products that the US produces that Canada doesn't. So there's some opportunities in meat and seafood. Vegan and plant-based is a growing category in Canada, and then private label products as well. So we touched on this earlier about some of the difficulties of working with the large grocery retailers in Canada, but private label is actually one way to get around some of those difficulties, because you're providing the product directly to the retailer, not having to worry about packaging or labeling, and there's no listing fees associated. So private label is a good opportunity. On this slide, we have some pictures of products that are from the SUSTA region and from SUSTA companies that are currently available in Canada. So as you can see, there's a nice wide selection of products, and this continues to grow. This is just a selection. This is not exhaustive, but just to give you an idea of some of the products that we have here and that Canadians like. Consumer profile of Canadians. So the Canadian population is diverse. It is also aging. So those are probably the two most important factors to be aware of for Canada. The consumer groups can be split into urban, rural, millennial, Gen Z, and baby boomers. So the majority of Canadians do live within major urban centers such as Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. But then the rest of Canada, which is in rural Canada, are spread in very rural areas that are not near these large city centers. Millennials and Gen Z are a growing population, and their purchasing power is increasing in Canada, but baby boomers still hold the majority of the purchasing power in Canada. Purchasing decision factors for Canadians traditionally have included price and taste, and they still do. Those are still very important drivers. But consumers are now increasingly looking to convenience and environmental stewardship, which comes back to the sustainability messaging that we discussed earlier. The ethnic diversity of Canada and the changing immigration patterns are contributing to changing food preferences. So as we have immigration driving our population growth, there will be opportunities for many different types of products and flavor profiles. So baby boomers account for 20% of the market. They're the folks that are seeking better quality, higher value products and driving premiumization trends. Canadians in general buy more fruits and vegetables than consumers in the US. And as we discussed earlier, most of these need to be imported. So that's another thing to keep in mind when marketing to consumers in Canada, is that they're really looking for fresh produce, fruits and vegetables, but also healthy foods. 1 in 5 Canadians is foreign born. So this is a big opportunity for ethnic retail stores, restaurants, flavor profiles. We have very diverse populations groups that aren't a melting pot, I guess you could say. Those immigration flows are retaining their cultures and their own diversity in Canada. So we have lots of different types of cultures and lots of different types of cuisines. Aurella touched on Quebec earlier, so it's just important to highlight that Quebec is a slightly different market. The consumer profile is a little bit different to that of the rest of Canada because it is mostly French speaking. So they have a different, usually different sources of immigration and population growth than the rest of Canada. Most of the immigration in Quebec comes from other French speaking countries. Quebec also has some more intense packaging and labeling regulations for French provenance. And there are just differences in the consumer attitudes. So consumers in Quebec typically make more frequent trips to the grocery store, and they're buying fresher foods and spending more time cooking, and they kind of value more culinary experiences, whereas the rest of Canada might do like a big grocery shop where you'd stock up on a whole bunch of stuff for a couple weeks. So for the route to market, how to enter Canada. Oops, sorry. First, you can talk to your state Department of Ag or your state regional trade group, which is SUSTA in this case. You can set up a call with the FAS to learn more about Canadian regulations, conduct some research. Aurela mentioned the GAIN reports earlier. That's a really good place to start to learn more about the Canadian market. Identify product-specific requirements. This is something that SUSTA and FAS can help with. Target a province or region if you're not looking at all of Canada. Which province do you want to start with? And then find and appoint a local partner. So the most typical route to market is to work with an importer or distributor. A broker may also be required to help with your sales in market, but it is not necessary. Some suppliers do go direct to grocery retailers, but the vast majority of products in grocery retail stores in Canada get on the shelf through an importer or distributor. It's not very common for grocery retailers to work directly with suppliers in Canada.
Laura, if I could say one thing about the GAIN
Yes,
reports,
please.
very valuable reports. We read the GAIN reports. They are such a great, just a wealth of information. Number one, to see if the country wants your products. It may not be a product that they want. Also, you need to make sure they have the money to buy your products. You know, if they really have a big need for it or want for it, but they can't afford your item, you're in a high-end product, but the country doesn't have that kind of money, the disposable income, it's not the country for you to be looking into. But the GAIN reports, very important. That's I can't stress that enough, to read the GAIN reports so you can learn your market of where you're trying to get into.
Thanks, Pat. And the final point to consider for route to market is to work collaboratively with your local partner. So whoever the importer distributor is that you decide to work with, you need to view it as a partnership, and really both parties should be invested in growing the business in Canada. Typically, buyers will be very honest with you up front when you're reaching out to buyers to see if they're interested in speaking about working together. They'll tell you right away if there's a conflict in their portfolio, if they don't see your product working out. They'll usually be quite honest about that. However, most buyers are very hard to get a hold of and are very busy, so sometimes follow-up may be required. If you're not receiving a response, send a few chaser emails. If you have a phone number, give them a call and see if they've had a chance to review your products. But they'll be quite honest. If they want to speak with you and they want to set up a call, they're interested. But if not, then it's not going to be a good fit. Pat, did you have anything to add here about like finding importer distributor partners?
Yeah, and I wanted so the number one thing on here, the route to market, talk to your state Department of Agriculture, state regional trade group, SUSTA and Argyle. SUSTA and Argyle are unbelievably important in this whole venture for you. They know the market. They're going to help you. They know the people. They know some people's reputation before you even get there. There's so much information to gain from SUSTA and Argyle. So you really need to reach out and be partnered with both of them. Very important.
Thanks, Pat. So some tips for new exporters. These are things that we've heard from companies and from buyers. So this may not be a one size fits all, but these are just some of the common themes. Create a brand or sales presentation that's specific for Canada. Canadian buyers want to see that you've done your research and that you're not using a generic or domestic sales deck. This goes back to being local and localizing and engaging locally. Put the time into making a deck specifically for Canada. Research and understand your competitors and the pricing of those competitors, the positioning of those products. Where your product has something that this other product don't have, and any gaps in the market that you can fill. Understand the regulatory requirements, such as the labeling and nutritional facts tables that we mentioned earlier. Know and communicate your USPs. Don't assume buyers will immediately know your USPs by looking at your product. Make sure you actually communicate all of that, and any certifications you have, like organic or kosher or the BRC, anything like that. Make sure it's in a brand deck and you're communicating those things. If you have awards or experience in other export markets, put that in your sales decks as well. Collaborate with your local partners, as we mentioned earlier, and dedicate resources to your product in Canada. Don't assume that working with a local importer or broker or distributor will be success or make your sales successful in Canada, it takes time and dedication on both sides. So make sure you have the resources available to put time into growing the brand in Canada. Pat, do these sort of align with your thoughts and your experience with Canada? Is there anything you want to add?
I think these are absolutely wonderful. I think you need to step foot into Canada. You need to do a trade show in Canada. You need to walk into the stores. You need to look at the shelves. You need to look and find out refrigerator size, your kitchen size. I mean, all these, if you're doing food products, to really understand the packaging size and everything else as well. But it's just like anything, the more time you spend on it, the better your result will be. If you go and you romance Canada and you go into Canada and you learn the market, you'll have way better success than if you sit back behind your desk and just think it's just like the US. It's very similar, but you really need to go learn the market. You need to step foot up there, do a trade show, and go into some places and see how it actually is. And it's a wonderful place. It'll be a great visit.
Great. So that's a nice segue. Pat's going to speak a little bit more about his experience, particularly with Canada, and just sort of go through how this export journey started and how it's going.
Well, thank you, Laura. We've very fortunate. We've been exporting since 1994. So we've had a lot of time to learn what we can do and what we can't do. And we realized really early on we needed SUSTA's help. And that if we were going to continue to do this, we needed the help from SUSTA to be able to afford the trade shows. So I think we've been with SUSTA in the early 2000s. And then we met Argyle along the way, wonderful source of information as well. But really, if you see the expense of some of these things, they may be daunting to you, but once you realize that you have help for half of it, it makes it a lot more affordable and easy to stomach. And all the just unbelievable amount of information and knowledge that you gain along the way from both of them as well. But I wanted to say that first. Okay, so here, ask your importer for help. All the steps of the way. Don't think you know it. Why not? It's free to ask your importer for help on something like that. Ask, what do they think? How does this look? What do you think your customers will like? Do you think this fits you? We have a saying here, it's easier to sell people what they want instead of what you want them to have. So if you know they want your product, then there's a need for your product, and then move forward that way. Don't try and push it in if there's not a place for it. Again, like I said earlier, deal in US dollars. I always say I'm not smart enough to deal in different currencies. So it's easy to me to just always say US dollars. So even in your email communication, USD. Don't assume that everybody knows what you're talking about. When you're quoting prices, USD after your numbers. And don't be embarrassed to talk about the money, because it's if you're too busy to talk about money, you're too busy. If it's in buying and selling, and make sure your language for your sales are in English that you understand them. Don't do it in a foreign language that you don't understand. You'll get yourself in over your head quickly. Just want to say that as well. Don't keep calling the buyers after you've met with them. If you call them a couple of times, they know if it's going to work or not. Circle back to them a couple of times, then you may wait 6 months and then give it another shot. But don't call them day after day after day after day, because they know you're calling. And if it's important to them, they'll call you right back. But take that time and spend it on somebody else that you may have better luck with. We always do a follow-up email campaign after a trade show. We want to let them know, thanks for coming by the booth. This is what we talked about, and this is the way to go forward with that. And then we have a trade show email list. So next week we're in New York. When I send out that email, I'll also send out the email to other people that have come by trade shows in the past. Just loop them in there. Say, hey, this is what we're doing now. Maybe the items we had at that trade show didn't fit, but the new one we're launching next week may fit them. Or they're like, oh my gosh, I forgot to order that product. I'm glad they emailed me. So it's just a nice, simple way of saying, we're still around, we're still relevant, we're still doing business. We'd love, and SUSTA, again, SUSTA's helped so many times. The first time we went to England, I think was like 2003 or 2004. We got back from a trade show there and we thought, oh my God, I don't know how we're going to do that again. It was we got so much interest, but it was so expensive, but we knew we wanted to do it and we thought we could do it, but the financial part was overwhelming. And for that point, for us to work with SUSTA and know we could ask questions, we could be in the SUSTA pavilion. It was just unbelievable how it changed our direction and we were able to really move forward with exporting. So very important to work with them. So appreciative of the network they have. You go through SESTA, all of a sudden you're talking to an FAS office, you're talking to the embassy in this country. They can tell you this customer, we feel this way about, or that way about, or the market is this way. I mean, these are all so important in going into anything new. So just, you know, I think we've been dealing in Canada since 2001, and I still look for information, still read GAIN reports, still love learning from things like this, because it's a changing market, just like the US. The world changes. What we knew yesterday may be a little different today and tomorrow, but staying current. If you enjoy learning, you will love exporting, because there's always something to learn. And you like meeting people. You're going to work with a lot of great people. That's the best part about it.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Pat. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so just to give a bit of a recap of SESTA programs in Canada, Danielle mentioned this at the beginning. Virtual consultations are available. One-to-one calls are always an option for SESTA member companies. We do trade missions, trade shows, and inbound buyer trips to the SESTA region. In October, there will be a SESTA Pavilion at Grocery Innovations Canada. This is a great show for packaged food and drink products. So I know there's a lot of folks on the line who sell packaged food and drinks. So if you have questions about Grocery Innovations, or if you might be interested in exhibiting, don't hesitate to reach out. The cost share is applicable for this show as well. We do labelings. We have webinars. We have another webinar coming up in September that is specific to labeling and regulations. And some of the events we've done in the past are CL Canada, CHFA, which is our natural and organic trade show here in Canada. We do the Canadian Produce Marketing Show. A lot of Canadian buyers go to Fancy Foods, which Pat just mentioned about next week. We do specific category trade missions into Canada. So a couple of weeks ago, we had a beer, wine, and spirits trade mission to Toronto. And then there are also a lot of really specific trade shows for plant-based foods and gluten-free products and that sort of thing. If you have any questions about SESTA's programs in Canada, feel free to reach out to Danielle or to Argyle, and we'd be happy to chat. So that concludes our formal webinar presentation. So I will now hand it back over to Danielle for the question and answer period.
Yes, great. Thank you, Laura, Pat. So many great tips and suggestions. So yes, as I mentioned when we got started, everybody's muted. Type your questions into the Q&A or into the chat. Either one works, and we'll get them answered. So how are the GAIN reports accessed? That's a great question. It is through the USDA website. So GAIN reports are written annually by the FAS, the USDA Foreign Ag Service, in each market where they're based. So I'll send a follow-up email once the video, the recording of the webinar and the PDF of this presentation, when I post them, I will send out an email and I'll include the link of where you can go search for the GAIN reports. Oh, somebody said the chat is disabled. That is weird. Well, then definitely use the Q&A. Sorry about that. Okay, what is the best way to find an importer? I will lob that one over to Pat or Laura.
I can chime in first. So best way to find an importer, you can talk to us at Argyle. We can help with some suggestions for importers depending on your product and the category. But also Pat was mentioning earlier about, trade shows and actually going to visit the market. A lot of importer and distributor companies walk the floor of trade shows looking for new products. But I would say those are kind of the best ways that come to mind for finding an importer. But Pat, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's great. And I think if you do the trade shows, you visit the market, you come across someone, it's still okay to go back to SESTA Argyle and say, hey, this person reached out to me or I met them there. Is this a viable contact? Anyway, sometimes you get emails or other things that are too good to be true. Always run those by SESTA or Argyle and just find out legitimacy of the person you're talking to.
All right, for Pat, how do you determine the markup when determining your retail cost?
Okay, great question. The retailer is going to hit their markup. They're going to take care of that part. So I'm going to give them a product at a price that I make money at. And it may not work for each retailer. So we don't back it from the retailer side. We back it from our side, our true cost going to market. So if you find out what your real costs are and what you're going to give as a discounted amount to a distributor or wholesaler or an importer, and make sure that that final number is a number that you're going to actually be profitable at. Don't let them tell you, I need to make 32%. You're going to charge me this, because that may not make money for you. And then you won't be around the next year. So that's how we determine it. We work it from the other way of the biggest discount we give a distributor. What is that number going to be for us? And is that making the numbers we want to hit?
That makes sense. What is the exact date for the October trade show? It is October 25th and 26th. And what I will do real quick is, you should see my screen now. So if you go to the SESTA website and you click on this events tab, this is where all of the trade shows and trade missions that we host are all here. And it's chronological. Oh, it's the 24th and 25th, excuse me. So Grocery Innovations Canada, and you'll see to participate and get your own booth, it's only $750. And that includes your 100 square foot booth with standard furniture, a market briefing and retail store tour, your badges, handling from the dock to the booth, and the listing in the show directory. And the
That's a bargain.
deadline to register is July 25th.
Then the market briefing that she's talking about there, that'll be a morning meeting, usually with some coffee or breakfast or something at the trade show. And it'll be somebody who's very experienced or usually in that market. And it's a great amount of information. Recommend definitely going to that.
Great. And don't forget, you can apply for cost share to get 50% back of the $750, your travel expenses, some travel expenses, and other materials too.
Wonderful.
Somebody else, my passport has expired. Do you think I have time to get a new one before that event? I do think that. I think you can get the expedited service, and it's usually a couple of weeks.
I just had mine expire and I just had to get a new one, and it was 8 weeks, but I was able to get it. Yep. Before I went to see Al Canada, not too long ago. Yeah, I know it was right down to the wire, but I did not realize it was, I haven't traveled the last couple of years. Apparently there's been a lot going on outside the US. But anyway, so yeah, I think you do too.
Yes. And I think you can pay extra to expedite that. And I mean, I know I just keep throwing the cost share word out there, but passports, any inoculations, not that you need that for Canada, but those things are also eligible for cost share. So, I mean, I know that's not a huge expense, but yeah.
I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there you go. That's
There
why
you
I'm
go.
on the webinar. That's why I need to keep learning. There you
go. Where will the trade show be? In Toronto. What is the retail store tour at Grocery Innovations? Is it the same as the market briefing? Laura, do you all do the retail store?
Yeah, so those will be two different events. The market briefing, it'll be a concept, similar to the webinar presentation. Like Pat said, we'll have a local expert come in and do a presentation about the grocery retail market that's more in depth. And then also just about some trends and that sort of thing. And then the retail store tour is separate. That is where you actually go out and visit multiple different types of grocery retailers. So we'd go to some of the large national ones that we mentioned. We'd also go to some of the smaller, more regional ones, and you have time in each store to look around and see the product selection, pricing, and the differences in the banners as well. We'll go to a discount banner, and then we go to some of the more higher end stores and everything in between, so that you can see the different sorts of stores that are in Canada. So those are two separate events, but usually they take place on the same day, which is typically the day before the trade show.
And it's so great to when someone walks up to your booth and you recognize the store name, and you can say, I just went to your store yesterday. I care. I'm learning the market. That is such a huge thing, because you will see some of these people at the trade show. And it's just a wonderful way to let them know that you're trying to learn the market and you want to work with them.
It's awesome. And talk about firsthand research. I mean, if can people in this country afford my product? And then you're, in the store seeing what similar products cost. That seems like a great way to determine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I've never exported before. I need a lot of help navigating these waters. Yes, I mean, Pat, there is a learning curve, but
There
it's
is.
doable.
And again, when you can do the trade show before you've exported. You can go up there, take your products, take your samples, and then test the water. And then when you do meet an importer, distributor, or a retail store, they will help you with those steps as well. But SESTA and Argyle will help you to navigate all those things. And it's really not that hard. It's going to keep other people out of the business. So it's going to help you to get in if you're not afraid of a little bit of paperwork. There is a huge opportunity there with a small amount of paperwork.
And I'll also, again, plug our export readiness training. If you are somebody who's never exported, that's a great way to, it'll probably alleviate a lot of future headaches if you go through that training. I'm sorry, we don't have the date for the next one scheduled, but it will most likely be in October. And it's done over Zoom, and it's 3 or 4 classes, and it's a couple hours long each time, but it really teaches you things like the next question is, how do I determine my product tariff classification? You would learn that in export readiness training. We get into all the details of classifying your product, doing market research, pricing your product, shipping, the key points of exporting. Is the show the size of Cial shows or Specialty Foods New York? Just trying to get an idea. Okay, so for Grocery Innovations, Laura, do you know? Or Pat, have you
It's much smaller than the Fancy Foods in New York, like way smaller. Keep in mind the size of the Canadian market is only 1/10 of that of the US, so all the trade shows are smaller compared to US trade shows. But it's one of the key trade shows in Canada. So in Canada, I would say the 2 key trade shows for packaged food and drink products are Cial Canada and Grocery Innovations Canada, and those 2 are very similar in size. It is the only food and drink trade show taking place in Canada this fall. It's the only one in Toronto for this fall for packaged food and drink products and the grocery market. So it's an important show, but shows in Canada will never compare in size to shows in the US or even some of the European shows. They're much smaller.
And the great thing about it being a smaller show, your time is going to be spent talking to people that are actual buyers. The people wearing the badges are the people that they are. You're not going to have the volume of people that you may have at New York, but you're going to have all the grocery people in one place. So your conversations are going to be very high quality, and you're going to be able to, bounce it off to people that you want to sell to.
Yep, that makes sense. Somebody else was chiming in. I think it's about the retail store tours, saying that you'll see some of your similar businesses in the market. So, which is great. You can see the competition and what they're up to. Do the sample materials that we take to the trade show have to be translated into French?
Not for Grocery Innovations, because Toronto is overwhelmingly English speaking. Everybody at the Grocery Innovation Show will speak English. So we don't, it's not a requirement to translate materials for that show. If you want to have a few translated materials, if you have any buyers that are attending from Quebec, it's a nice gesture, but it's not expected and you don't need to. The majority of materials at that trade show will be in English. It's very rare to see anything in French at GIC.
Okay.
And what you can say to the buyers or the importers, we're willing to make the stickering of the label. And if they do a huge run, obviously you could put the money into complete redesign and packaging and all that. But just let them know you're open to doing the bilingual labeling and stickering to start with.
Somebody else asked, is that it's similar to ANTAD in Mexico, which I don't know if anybody here has been to ANTAD. No, I've never been. Sorry, Dave. I don't know.
It's a typical European style booth. The stands, we call them booths in the US, but their stands are salons, depends on where you are. But it is a typical trade show format.
Okay, I know, and sorry, we are over the hour and I know everybody has places to be. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who joined today and especially to our presenters at Argyle and Pat, thank you so much. And Arella, who had to leave a little early. This was so informative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you
Yeah.
everyone for attending.
And I will be in touch, as I mentioned, with an email that has a lot of follow-up information for everybody. And hopefully we'll see you at Grocery Innovations Canada or somewhere else in the world. And we look forward to supporting you as you go down this road.
Thank you for all your
Thank
help that you
you.
guys give all of us. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.